You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth, one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hey everyone, so glad to be here tonight. I tell you, it's been a crazy day here in Southern California as we sort of broke our drought today with lots of wonderful rain. I kind of broke my backside as I left the house rushing out today to pick up one of my kids. And my front step was like super slippery. We're just not used to having wet steps. And I tell you, my feet went right out from under me. And it's a good thing I have some natural cushioning there, because I think I would be much more hurt than I ended up being. But I want you to know I'm working through the pain tonight. I've already treated myself with some secret traditional family remedies, namely a pan of brownies. That usually does the trick. Of course, I got my coffee press here as usual. So I got my jab sitting right here. So I'm ready to go. I'm excited about tonight's show. And I'm glad I've got such a wonderful guest, because I intend to sort of sit back and let him school us tonight on some ancient secrets. Before I get started really quickly, I want to let everyone know that I've also been working under duress from my tour partner, Gary Evans, who is cracking the whip on me to get my itinerary done for the tour of Southwest France in September. Now, I'm going to be taking tours in September. One of them is going to be over to the Provence area around Nice and around that area. And around St. Maximum, St. Baum, around those legendary areas of Mary Magdalene and the Knights Templar. And I'm going to do that tour with Gloria Amendola. A lot of you people know Gloria. She's a great friend of Night Vision and a regular returning guest. Also, I'm going to be doing a separate tour to the Rennes-le-Château region. You all know about my love for that area, with Gary Evans. And that, if I get on the ball tonight after we get off the air and finish that itinerary, that should be posted very, very shortly. And I appreciate all you who've already booked up for that, even prior to getting an itinerary. And it's going to be a great place. I mean, of course, we'll be seeing Mr. Henry Lincoln, our good friend and co-author of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, author of The Holy Place and Key to the Sacred Pattern, about that very region. And also, I'm sure we'll be meeting up with Tim Wallace Murphy, another best-selling author, on sort of the bloodline families, the Disposini, the Knights Templar. And we also may be meeting up and crossing paths with Gloria, who may come on over to Rennes-le-Château with us and give a presentation to our tour group as well. I know a lot of you have enjoyed her events and the tours that she's done and the ones that she and I have done together. So be looking for that information to be coming out soon. We really appreciate all your interest in the show. Appreciate all the people who recommend guests for me for this show. I'd like to give you what you like to hear. So if you have a recommended guest, shoot it to me. Shoot it over to Inception Network if you want, and they'll get it right to me. Also, I want to say thank you for all those of you who this week friended me on Facebook, and those of you who liked the Night Vision radio page on Facebook. Every little bit helps. Um, and I'm going to be posting some things on the Night Vision Facebook page if you'd like to help a little bit further, some things that we could use some help with to help keep this little operation running, the wheels turning. And, maybe you can help, maybe you can't, but in any case, we certainly appreciate your interest and your listenership in the show. Now, that's all the housekeeping items I have for today. My guest tonight is, as I said, he's going to educate us on some secret ancient knowledge. In fact, the Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch, which is the subject and the title of his very first book, but certainly not his first foray into research in this area. In fact, he's got a real family connection. So tonight, I would like to welcome RJ Von Bruning. Thanks so much, RJ, for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, it's great to have you. I just love the subject matter of your book and all the esoteric knowledge we can get. I think we should really just lap it up. Now, having said that, a lot of us are not experts in esoterica, and we're not experts in secret societies or these so-called bloodline families. Now, we've called you've called your book "The Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch," and I'd like to get into just who is or who was Enoch. But first, tell us a little bit about RJ and how you got into this and just what that family connection might be.
Well, I've always kind of been interested in secret societies, the occult, paranormal activity, things like that. I spent my early years growing up in southeastern Arizona, which was really kind of unique because I was allowed to, or was exposed to a lot of Indian legends, and it's a lot of the Old West. So you always have myths and ghost stories and treasure stories, and it was just always just incredibly fascinating to me. And then for myself personally, as I grew up, my family is kind of unique. I was always told when I was growing up that I came from a Masonic family, but I was never really given any real information on it. My immediate family, my brother's sister and parents didn't seem to take too much interest or have anything to do with it, but my grandparents and great uncles and every other person I ever met that I was related to had something to do with it. And I was always really drawn and curious about it, especially when nobody would speak very much to me about it. And being a young kid, and even as I've grown older, has just been something that kind of drives you crazy because you just want to know what was going on. And then as I've gotten older, family members have passed away, and I've been given numerous Masonic items, esoteric items, family histories and stories that I never knew about growing up. And that really just kind of sparked my interest even deeper into it all.
Right. I think obviously when something, you start looking into something and you sort of run into some barriers and it seems like that there are some secrets involved, that makes you want to know about it even more. That makes it all the more attractive. But certainly having the family connection was probably a real, driving force for you as well. I can imagine. I think you and I had a brief conversation earlier today where I told you that, my sort of foray into this material was in 1982 when I read the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which really challenged the way, that I had been taught and brought up. And I found it very exciting, yet kind of scary, because I'm thinking, okay, what if the way that I was taught was really right, and I'm going to go straight to hell for looking into all this. And then I sort of reasoned with myself, and I thought, okay, well, if there is a God and God created us, then he also created my mind, or she created my mind, and how can I be held to task for using my mind, just to question? And I'm being honest in my seeking. So I think a lot of us sort of get to that place where we're sort of seeking, and it seems like you sort of started that journey rather early on in your life compared to a lot of us who sort of come into it in a young adulthood.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I said, secret societies in general are just fascinating, and most people find them fascinating because the big question is what's so secret about it? What are they hiding? What is the mystery that they protect? And that's one of the things that I think kind of drives people crazy. And at the same time, it generates conspiracy theories and some pretty outlandish ideas floating around out there. I mean, you only have to get on the net for a few minutes to see that.
Wow, that's really wild. Well, so once you started, your studies, and how did you get on this Enoch path?
Actually, that's kind of a funny little story. About 5 years ago, I managed to get my hands on an actual copy of a translation of the Book of Enoch, and had the opportunity to sit down and read it. And like most other people, as I was reading it, started wondering and questioning why it wasn't in the Bible, because it seemed to answer a lot of questions and fill in a lot of gaps. And I kept reading it, and it does get a little repetitive. And then as I got closer to the end, I came across what's known as the dream vision. It's also called the prophecy of the animals. And this little story that essentially nobody reads floored me. It stopped me in my tracks. It is an allegorical account of the biblical story told with animals. And like I said, it's kind of an odd little story when you first read it. And all the theologians, all the experts, everybody that's read it agrees that it's just the biblical story told with animals. But this story is actually much more important. This story is basically what my entire book is about, and that is unlocking the dream vision and the symbolism in this story, which in turn, kind of by accident, unlocks the whole story that makes up the esoteric religion.
And I'm sure you must have found a common thread weaving throughout not only time but even cultures that all connect back to this sort of ancient knowledge and information. But who was Enoch? I mean, can you first tell us, for those of us who may not know, who is Enoch and why do we care today?
Well, Enoch to me is one of the most unique individuals in the Judeo-Christian tradition. He is spoken of in the Old and New Testaments. In the Old Testament, he's recorded as one of the patriarchs. He is the son of Jared, the father of Methuselah, and he's more famously known as the great-grandfather of Noah. He's also traditionally thought never to have died because God came and took him. In the book of Genesis, we're told that he lived 365 years. He walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. And that by itself, to me, was one of the fascinating things that first attracted me to Enoch. Because in the tradition, he seems to be the only person that God himself came and personally took. And he doesn't seem to do this with anybody else. And that's right by itself is really kind of strange within the tradition. Outside of that, there's not too much known about Enoch. Everything else we do know pretty much comes from the Book of Enoch itself, which in that he tells us that he was a scribe and that he was taught personally by the host of heaven, which is what he called the angels, and that the angels were ordered by the Ancient of Days, who is normally how he referred to God, and that he was personally taught how to do all of this by them. The other unique thing about Enoch, and especially in the Book of Enoch, when I was first reading it, and other people have pointed this out, is the way it's written. Because unlike most other traditional religious texts, it's written in the first person. Enoch constantly refers to that he goes someplace. I see that. I talked to the Ancient of Days. I saw this. I went there. And he also has a real personal one-on-one relationship with all of these beings.
Now, excuse me, did you first get a copy of the Book of Enoch and start to study it? What year was that?
About 5 years ago.
Oh, 5 years ago. Yeah, I guess it was sort of available, but up until a few years ago or several years ago, it was really difficult to get a copy, or at least an English translation copy, right, of the Book of Enoch. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it really, really was. Nowadays, with the internet, that problem's solved. One of my favorite sites, sacredtext.com, has the Book of Enoch, complete English translation. And they also have a host of all kinds of other old books, things that you normally can't get anymore, or you have to have special access to a library or something. Most of them have been scanned, and now you can read them online.
Wow.
And the vast majority of them are free.
Oh, that's amazing. So it has things like the Nag Hammadi Library and the Dead Sea Scrolls or things like that, and also
and even more obscure texts for magic or esoteric thought or ancient history, Kabbalism, just about everything you can think of.
Oh, that's a good thing to know. Sacredtext.com. Yeah, that sounds really good. Thanks for sharing that with us.
I'm going
to be on there myself, definitely checking that out. Now, if you don't mind, I normally don't ask questions from the listeners in the first part of the show, but it just so happens that we're talking about the identity of Enoch. And I had two questions that were emailed to me by a listener who coincidentally ordered your book today after hearing you were going to be on the show and giving me a call. And she said, "Can I send you a couple of questions?" I said, "Of course you can." So she said, "I just ordered his book." And she said, "Do you believe that Enoch is Atlas, the king of Atlantis?" And I guess she's sourcing Peter Dawkins.
That's kind of interesting. There is a legend of Enoch. Actually, there's a whole host of legends that surround Enoch. And that's one of the big things within the esoteric religion or religious belief system, because Enoch is rather important. And within a number of those legends, he is thought to be associated with Atlas.
That's interesting.
Trying to find it right now for that particular legend.
And I guess Atlas is identified as the same Egyptian god Atum or Timu.
Oh, okay. Now I have it here. It's the early Greek Christians that related Enoch to Atlas and to the Egyptian Hermes.
Which, brings me to my next question, because she asked additionally, is it the Egyptian god Thoth, which is, of course, Hermes is Thoth, right?
Right.
Hermes
That's
just
one of the
just
unique
as
things about Enoch is that he is associated with Atlas. He's associated with Hermes, which is associated with Thoth, and he's always associated with knowledge, and especially divine knowledge in all of the legends. And even in the Judeo-Christian tradition, he always has some type of special information that was given to him by God himself, or by the host of heaven.
interesting. I got the chat room of Twitter here. I guess Twitter is not the right word to use for the chat room, because they're not tweeting, they're chatting, but they're talking about Neutron says that he has a chart that shows Enoch had a daughter named Amzara that married Noah. And then in parentheses, Noah was Enki's son. And then Durhuff says, isn't there a list of fallen angels that Enoch provides? So I guess
Yes, he does. For the first question, that comes out of the legends of Enoch within the tradition. We don't know any specific information about any offspring. All we know is that he had sons and daughters besides his son Methuselah. Who they married or how they interacted, there is some things related to in the Talaman and also the Kabbalah systems, but those are still within kind of the legendary realm.
Mm-hmm.
And lost my train of thought there for the second question.
The second question was the list of fallen angels that Enoch provides.
Yes, he does. In fact, Enoch is actually the book of Enoch is the source material for the Judeo-Christian tradition for Lucifer and the fall of the angels, that they made a deal. They came to Mount Hermon, and he gives a list of the leaders and then gives a list of basically what each one of these individuals taught mankind and corrupted mankind.
That's really interesting. How does it sort of jibe with the ancient aliens, Zechariah Sitchin type material?
Well, I kind of tie that in because I present this information as a thought experiment, and I start with the ancient alien theory, and mainly start focusing on the event that's recorded as the fall of Lucifer and his angels, and point out, like you were saying before, that it's connected to other mythologies, that this is also the same story as Zeus coming to Earth, and then the Olympians following behind him. This is Ra coming to Earth. This is the exact same story that's recorded over and over and over again of a being that's normally referred to as a bringer of light, which the light is usually referred to as knowledge, to Earth, to live among mankind.
Yeah, I think that it sort of correlates with the Osiris story, too.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of one of the big key points about the dream vision is once you start understanding the symbolism that's recorded in the story and how it relates to the Bible and then to other mythologies, you can start seeing a connection that you were unaware of before. And that's one of the things that the esoteric does to be able to hide this information.
Well, yeah, sure. That's what it's all about. The occult, the hidden. And I guess hidden in some ways, well, for a lot of reasons, and some obvious in that they had to protect, because traditionally people that go against certain, organizations and agencies don't fare very well, and they don't last very long. They get murdered or they get mowed down. So it's necessarily so. A lot of it is kept secret. But I wonder if there's not more reason for the occult nature of this information. Is there something to the idea that a person needs to sort of go into the dark or into themselves in order to, experience some sort of initiation into this material. And if it was just all laid out there, and one didn't have to seek it out, would it have as much meaning?
I think that's kind of open to debate, but it has always been traditionally that you had to be initiated. It's always been considered that the hidden esoteric story was not for the average person. And it was basically reasoned because they wouldn't understand it. And I think you could have made that argument a couple of hundred years ago, but today, I don't think you really can. I mean, our technologies, our ideas, I mean, the average person today is so much farther advanced in their knowledge and open to new ideas.
Well, and can read and,
Yeah.
Are actually literate. I mean, there was, a time when, only the elite people were able to read, and then usually only males. So now, most of us can read, and most of us can, seek out knowledge that might not have been. But I agree, there are people that either would not understand it or wouldn't be interested in understanding it. It would, it's like some people kind of live on the surface, and other people, I think, really want to dig and get to the heart of everything. And I think in some ways that keeps things a little on the secret side. The fact that you have, you just have to dig a little bit to get to it. And as you and I were talking earlier today about how many layers and layers there are to this type of information. And it's sort of mind blowing. And I have absolutely seen people lose their minds who were steeped in this material and just, started, you pulling on a thread and you think you're getting somewhere. And then suddenly you found yourself pulling on a whole new piece of thread. But it seems like from what I've been able to, and thank you for sending me your book this week, by the way, from what I've been able to, it's nice that you've sort of been able to get your head around a big lot of this material and be comprehensive about putting it down so that we can kind of get it, those of us who are sort of new to the information. So it's really good. I would suggest highly you get RJ's book, The Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch, and check it out. It's really, really interesting. Oh my goodness, it's just about time almost for another break. I guess we've got about a minute or so to go. So, RJ, why don't you give us out your website and tell us how we can get your book?
The book is available. The easiest and quickest way to get it would be to order it from Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and just about any other reputable book dealer online it's available at now. It can also be ordered directly from the publisher, Tate Publishing, and their website. My regular website is kind of in the process of being rebuilt. Mm-hmm. So I
know you have a blog, don't you?
Yeah, I would recommend everybody to go to my blog for right now until the website's rebuilt. The blog is The Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch, all one word, .blogspot.com.
Yeah, that's a great place to go to get information, and you can check the archives there for information that RJ has put up in the past. Now we're gonna take a quick break here. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We are talking to RJ Von Bruning, and we're talking about the forbidden knowledge of Enoch. So please stay right with us.
It's everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to NightVision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
Hello, IRN listeners. This is MJ saying hello and sharing an awesome secret I discovered. It's called DreamNouage.com. Fresh, raw, organic ingredients are used to create all their products. They are made in very small batches to ensure quality and freshness. Handmade in the USA, each product is created with care and with the finest organic ingredients. There are no preservatives, dyes, or chemicals in any product. Stop by Dream Nuage and relax. That's DreamNuage.com. Simple, raw, organic. You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back to Night Vision Radio. If you're just now joining us, I'm your host, René Barnett, and we are talking tonight with RJ Von Bruning. He is a first-time author, which is really exciting because he tackled a huge subject in his new book, The Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch. And we've been talking about, sort of where this sprang up. Was it in the ancient alien realm? Is it something that's always been around and handed down, generation to generation, culture to culture? And we were joking on the break, MJ, our producer, who I always forget to mention MJ too during the show, and every single time, as soon as we go off the air, I'm hitting myself. MJ does such a wonderful job, so I want to thank him for his good work. But we were chatting. I was chatting with RJ and MJ, MJ, and all the JJs were joining in. We were talking about the history behind this and how these things have affected us in our society. And my question during the break to RJ, was, were these the guys? These were not only the kings, but the kingmakers, these royal bloodline families and their connections who carried this knowledge. And what does that mean? Has it had an effect on the way that the world is run, RJ?
Yes, I think it does. Because believe it or not, you can actually trace the origins of all of this. And there's actually a place in time that you can point at. It starts with the legendary school of Alexandria, and especially the school that was housed within the library. It was known as the Alexandrian School of Philosophy, and most anybody who's ever studied history realizes that this was kind of an eclectic kind of school and library, that it had people from all over the empire that Alexander created. You had Egyptian priests, Jewish rabbis, Aramaic teachers, Greek philosophers. So there was all kinds of different ideas coming around and being thought of then. The School of Alexandria actually developed Gnostic thought, and Kabbalism comes out of this ancient school, and a number of other philosophies. One of the big, huge breakthroughs was that there was a theory developed there, and it was advocated by one of the more famous headmasters known as Plato. And the idea is that the sacred writings of especially the Hebrews, because they used a system of allegories and symbolism, was probably the true source of all religious and philosophical doctrine, and that the literal meaning was the literal meaning of the story was for the common person, and then the esoteric or the symbolic part of the story was only for the initiated. And that's kind of the origin of all of this. And when the library was eventually destroyed, it was the people that had learned this information there that had gone and basically disappeared into society and became the little groups that we call esoteric or secret societies, would be about 1,500 years ago. And these eventually morphed and evolved and grew into the groups we're all familiar with today, like the Masons or the Knights Templar, the Cathars, like you and I were speaking about earlier, and dozens of other groups, all centered around this type of thought, this esoteric thought that has hidden knowledge. And that's kind of one of the big secrets about this stuff, is that most of this knowledge actually comes from the Library of Alexandria. And that's one of the things they've been hiding and moving through history. And there's a good chance that there was incredible amounts of information. We know there was incredible amounts of information there. And if you had some of this information hundreds or thousands of years ago, it would make a big difference on how you could do things and influence things, because it would put you ahead of everybody else, especially medieval Europe, where most everybody was illiterate and only the elites and only small little groups could actually read and write.
Well, it's just, a shame that Library of Alexandria was lost in the way that it was, burned. And oh my goodness, I've always been so drawn to Alexandria. And as you said, there was such a communion of thought there, different people coming from different philosophies. And it was just such a wonderful place. It's just such a shame that it's lost to the world. But I'm sure some of it.
That's one of the great things about the esoteric show, is because they claim not all of it was lost. They have it.
That's what I was just getting ready to say, is I'm sure not all was lost. I'm sure people, have secreted stuff away. I'm sure there's tons of stuff in the Vatican Library, in the Vatican archives, I should say. I know there's a lot of ancient texts and manuscripts that they hold that, are not viewable by anyone outside of their inner circle. So there's no telling what they might have, as well as other, private collectors, and probably, as I've always felt, families who pass down, from generation to generation, information and, materials and texts and things like that. I have no doubt that happened.
Done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you
that's
have
probably
any...
one of the most important things that's probably overlooked, is how so many things are passed down just through families.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny with going back to what you said earlier about, how one of the reasons that it was kept secret was, because they felt most people wouldn't understand it. It wasn't for everyone. And, I remember when I was really beginning to delve into this information, and even as, late as maybe 10 years ago, that really bothered me, that, okay, if this is the real deal, if this is the real truth of everything, then it should be available to every person, regardless of their, socioeconomic class or anything. But I'm starting to understand that it's not necessarily that reason for keeping it secret, like we're holding it, selfishly and jealously away from you, but it's for those who are ready for it. And
yes, and then there's
the
historical aspect that up until very recently too, especially in Europe, this type of information, you were burned at the stake, especially during the Inquisition, and it was driven underground. That's one of the other reasons why there's so much secrecy about some of this stuff, is it's kind of habit, because at one time it would get you killed because it was considered heresy just to think it, much less actually voice it.
Right. The chat room is still really especially active tonight, and Neutron is asking you, what is your take on J.J. Hertog's The Lost Keys of Enoch, written in the 80s?
The Enochian keys, I view that as kind of a combination of a modern and ancient idea. The Enochian keys are a more recent phenomenon that come out of I would say the mid-1600s. I'm trying to remember right off the top of my head of the two guys that were...
Two guys?
Edward Kelly and John Deere. That's who they were, in the late 16th century England. Both of them claimed to be spirit mediums and magical investigators, and they both created what they called the Enochian language, or an angelical language that was given to them.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
Hello, IRN listeners. This is MJ saying hello and sharing an awesome secret I discovered. It's called DreamNuage.com. Fresh, raw, organic ingredients are used to create all their products. They are made in very small batches to ensure quality and freshness. Handmade in the USA, each product is created with care and with the finest organic ingredients. There are no preservatives, dyes, or chemicals in any product. Stop by Dream Nuage and relax. That's DreamNuage.com. Simple, raw, organic. You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Hey, we're back again. Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty out there in Montana with RJ. I guess you must be out in the Badlands, RJ.
Well, we do have a storm in the area.
Well, you know, it's been thundering and lightning here during the whole show, which, as I said at the beginning, is very unusual for Southern California. So I can imagine you get some good ones out that way.
Yeah, right up here in the Rocky Mountains. It's really nice sometimes.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been resisting all night to ask you if you moved to Montana to become a dental floss tycoon, but I figured you might not know what I was talking about, but I know some of my chat rooms
will. Yeah, I do. That's an old Iron Maiden reference.
Actually, it's Frank Zappa.
Or Frank Zappa. I remember from Iron Maiden the T-shirt from him.
Oh, really? Really? Yeah. But anyway, yeah, he was moving to Montana soon, going to be a dental floss tycoon. Every time I talk to you, that song goes through my head. That's so silly. But anyhow, we are talking about the Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch, and someone in the chat room is asking, is your book out, and how do they get it? They must be late joining the group. And yes, it certainly is out. You can order it from Amazon. You can order it from Barnes & Noble. You can go to Tate Publishing, which is RJ's publisher. Just Google Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch, and it'll pop right up. The author's name is RJ Von Bruning, and we are talking to him right now, and he's sharing some of his great research with us, which is really, really interesting. So now, you know, you were in the middle of saying something, and if you want to take up where you left off, fine. If you want to get started again, if we got thrown completely off, you just say.
I can pick up right where I was.
Great.
Referring back to the Enochian keys, that the idea of the Enochian keys comes from a Masonic legend. It's actually in their writings that are easily available. And the idea is that before the destruction of the flood, Enoch had constructed a series of vaults and that there was a set of special keys that you had to use to open the doors to go into these vaults. And the Masonic legend hints at the idea that these keys actually were some type of light-type mechanism, that you had to shine light into certain apertures to open each door. Mm-hmm. And I've always suspected that that's kind of where the idea of Enochian keys comes from. It's kind of fallen out of the Masonic legend, and then people have picked it up with the Enochian magic idea that originated in the late 1600s with Edward Kelly and John Dee.
Oh, I see, and then just kind of melded those together.
Yeah, and they've kind of come together. The actual text or anything, no, there is actually nothing really out there from ancient sources that actually says this stuff actually existed for like a key like that. They all seem to be rooted directly in legend.
Hmm. And this legend of the keys and the light going through the aperture that you were talking about, you said that's a Masonic idea.
Yes, that's one of their Masonic legends.
And not necessarily.
Masons actually have tons and tons of legends, and they use them predominantly for teaching, to try to like for moral teachings and stuff, much like Aesop fables. And that's kind of where I think people get a little confused with when they hear some of the Masonic legends, that a lot of them aren't true. They were put together for a different purpose.
Just symbolic.
To get an idea across. Yeah, more of a symbolic or a moral or ethical teaching.
Mm. Right.
And that's one of the other ways, too, that they kind of hide this, is it's kind of hiding it within their own writings. And if you're not aware of this, if you're not really sure what they're talking about, you just kind of get confused.
We were talking earlier, I think it was on the break actually, privately about, the people who have the power, or people who have the knowledge, kind of have the power. It seems like, these secret societies, these aristocratic families, these royal bloodline families, and people like that. And that if we were to all have that knowledge, it would sort of maybe take some of the sting out of what it is that they know, or steal some of their thunder. But how would that work? And is there anything, I guess what I'm saying, about this secret knowledge that gives an edge? And if so, what is it? Is there magic involved? Is there...
Actually, when you get very deep into the esoteric knowledge, you discover that one of the big secrets that they have, and this is one they try to guard, is basically the ancient astronaut idea. Mm. They think that there was a prior civilization on this planet, and it was two-tiered. One part of it was highly advanced, probably more advanced than we are today, and one part that was really primitive. And that this civilization ended up destroying itself, which then eventually gave rise to us. And they think this all happened around 13,000 years ago. That's where it gets a little wild, and it kind of makes people go, oh, that sounds kind of crazy. Where's your evidence? The truth is there's actually a lot of evidence to back it up. The problem is you don't know the whole backstory behind it, because you've been taught an entirely different idea. And this is where one of the conflicts between esoterics and traditionally the Catholic Church comes from, is the esoterics do not agree with the current history we've all been taught. They think it's wrong. And the people that have always pushed that history was the church traditionally. And that's one of the reasons they have a conflict with the Catholic Church, is they have a different argument. Mm. And then you kind of have this behind-the-scenes fighting going on between these different groups. And, some of it's philosophical, some of it's more centered in reality, But if you think about it for a minute, if that was true, if there was a prior civilization and it blew itself up and was technologically advanced, there's a good chance that pieces of that technology would survive to our own day, and that people have found this technology over the years. And then it doesn't take much of a leap from there to understand, to go, wow, and until the advent of electricity, most people would probably think of all this stuff as magic or dangerous or possessed or demonic. And that's where I think one of the big things for the esoteric, and what really kind of makes this incredibly interesting, is there's a real good possibility that they have access, or they have found advanced technologies from this prior civilization. And if they actually had found it prior to our own advent of our own technology, that would give you quite an advantage over people. I always like using the idea of thinking, well, think of your own laptop computer and how user-friendly it is, and somebody found it 1,000 years ago. Even if you couldn't read the language, but you managed to turn it on, just the way it's set up, finding the spreadsheet program or anything like that, would put you centuries ahead of anybody else around you, just with one little piece of technology. And then trying to tell people that they wouldn't even understand how it worked, so how would you explain it? It's magic, it's divine,
right.
Things like that.
And is there anything in this Enochian information that does pertain to technology by any chance? Or does it refer to, advanced technologies?
Actually, the Enoch himself and stuff, in the Book of Enoch, he describes a number of things that most researchers that aren't theologians agree that sound like high technology. He describes, going down a corridor that's the floor is like crystal and the walls are like fire and light comes from the ceiling. That just screams of technology. That screams of something that's been manufactured. He talks on being taken up away from the earth and going up above towers and the clouds up to heaven. And he gives descriptions as if you were reading it, like as if he was an astronaut and actually really had done it. And that's one of the big things, too, that's always kind of made Enoch so intriguing, is some of the stories that are embedded within the Book of Enoch, where he's interacting with these beings. And he gives the impression that they're permanently here, that they're not coming and going, that they stay here, and he's lucky enough to be able to interact with them.
And is that, are you saying that, okay, he believes that they were here, they were always here, not coming from someplace else and then, or going and then returning again. So is that something that you see as a viable, real possibility?
Personally, I do. I think it solves a humongous amount of problems. I proposed the idea kind of close to the end of my book, one of many, on that the idea that these beings, the ones that our ancestors called gods, that today people call ancient aliens or aliens still running around, that they may have originally been here from here, Earth, that this is their home, that they originally evolved here, developed here, and most likely left, and then eventually came back at some later date. And that's why we don't have all this weird alien DNA and stuff in us, and how they were so easy to manipulate everything. I think it just makes more logical sense. And then there's always been the idea and the legends kind of pushed around that there's somebody living underground, that there's an ancient species, another race on this planet or another species on this planet that stays hidden, that's millions of years old. And I think that could possibly be related, that they could all be related.
You hear a lot of stories like that surrounding the whole reptilian idea. That
yes. And the one that always
reptilians.
sticks with me, and I think it's probably because I grew up in Arizona, was the Hopi talking about how they were taken underground and that they lived underground with these beings.
Lizard people, weren't they?
Mostly the Hopi refer to them more as a more insectoid, like insect. Sometimes they're called ant people, sometimes called the insect people. And I just I've always found that story rather particular. And then as you look around the world, you see, like in Turkey, you have entire cities that were built underground. And the question always rises, why? Why were they living underground? If the esoterics are correct, the reason they were living underground, or they went underground, is just because the civilization basically was in the process of destroying itself. And they were going underground to survive.
Protection, yeah.
And then once the conditions had improved, basically our ancestors were pushed back up to the surface, which fits with a number of legends and stories that float around.
Yeah, absolutely. Der Huff from the chat room says, does RJ think Enoch was kind of an ordained judge or accuser assigned to expose and clarify?
No, I don't think so. He's always portrayed in the legends of being unbelievably righteous. In all legends, he's always connected to God himself, and that he's always given this information, and that the idea is that he somehow needs to protect it for later generations. I don't think he was a judge or anything, but there are references of where he was in the Book of Enoch, where he was sent to condemn the fallen angels before the destruction. That basically he was told to go tell them that they were going to be destroyed along with the humans. So I think that might be where the idea is coming from. But no, he's never ever portrayed as a judge or bringing a wrath or anything.
Yeah. Now, we sort of talked about, the ancient alien idea and sort of the underground dwellers, a civilization that lives underground. But what else is tied in? Now, anytime that I've had any dealings in research with, sort of secret societies and people of that ilk, it has been sort of the idea that they were anti-religion. I know, we talked earlier today about this being sort of a new religion or a new way of thought, or actually an old way, but something that, we may just be learning about now. But when I've asked directly the question, what is the mandate or the raison d'etre, of your secret society? And I keep hearing the same thing. It's to unify mankind under, spirituality, not religion. Do you find that to correspond with these teachings?
In many ways, there does appear to be a common idea that humanity can be united and with one belief and one idea. That's, I think, where some of the conflict comes with a number of these esoteric groups, because people kind of forget that, like when I say esoteric groups or esoteric religion, it kind of needs to be viewed the same way as like referring to saying like Christianity. It's not a monolithic group. There's different sects, there's different beliefs, different groups, and they don't all get along.
Right.
And they bicker and they fight among themselves. And I think that's one of the things too that people kind of forget and miss with some of these, is that there's a little background fighting going on with these guys. And in many ways, they have similar roots, like Christianity. Because Christianity at one time was a mystery religion or a mystery school that basically went public and pushed everybody else out of the way. And in fact, destroyed most of them. And that's where I think some of the animosity comes from the groups, is they don't really, I've never seen or heard where they have a problem with the belief. What they have a problem with is with the organization, with like the church. And that seems to be an argument and kind of a hatred that goes back all the way to the beginning.
Yeah, it's the organized religion that, I guess, because I think you're right. I don't think there's really a conflict with an individual's faith, but when it
right,
starts,
because most esoteric groups view that each religion, say whether it be Hinduism or Catholicism or Judaism, they kind of group all religions together. They think each group has a part of the story. They have part of the information, and you can only know it all when you bring all of them together.
Oh, that's
kind of the idea.
idea.
Is that that kind of basically everybody had a history book that was all torn up, and we each have a different chapter. And, you know, like the Bible is one chapter, the Quran's another chapter, the Hindu writings are another one, and that we're never ever going to figure it all out until we bring them all together and see how they connect together. That's one of the other ideas that just kind of floats in the esoteric, that there is the unity that's there. And that's kind of one of the things that help to bring humanity together, to understand that we all have the same ideas, and we just kind of need to realize that.
Yeah. It seems like, you know, it's funny you said they sort of group them all together, but you know, it's in that, you know, you kind of have to study them all to get the total picture. But also, when you do study them all, and I'm talking about, you know, almost all the major religions, certainly Judaism, Christianity, Islam, others, even Buddhism and Hinduism, they have sort of the same set of values, the same set of do's and don'ts. They're all very similar in their teachings.
Yes, and that's one of the secrets that the esoterics think you have to look at, is that's a clue to show you how they connect together. But they all have the similar teachings, or they all have the same wordings. And that's one of those little hints to go, oh, okay, these things are connected. They weren't happening, they weren't isolated events like we're traditionally taught, but they were actually much more interconnected.
And we've still got a conversation going in the chat room about the fallen angels. And Durhuff wants to know, do you know why the Creator sent the archangels to deal judgment, and what was dealt?
Yes, he did end up sending the archangels. Enoch says that there were 7 sent, but he only names 4, which is the traditional Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, etc. The judgment that came from that was the flood. Now, what's really unique is within the dream vision of Enoch, he gives a little different description of the flood. And one of the big things is that I try to emphasize in the book is he speaks of an enclosure, which that just kind of leaped out at me. That he gives the impression that there was an enclosure, and that it was this enclosure that was flooded, and that all the peoples were in there. And that's one of those nice little tidbits in the esoteric where they kind of imply that it wasn't a worldwide flood, it was something that happened in a more localized area with a much smaller group. It just seemed like the world because that was their world.
That was their whole world, exactly.
Right, and that was the only little group.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. You know, you've mentioned a few times dream vision, and you talked about, this in terms of Enoch. And is dream vision, when you talk about it, are you simply talking about Enoch's dream vision, or are you talking about an idea of a dream vision for everyone?
I'm referring to Enoch's dream vision specifically. That is within the Book of Enoch, starting on chapter 83 to chapter 90, for anybody who happens to have the Book of Enoch on. That is the entire dream vision. So when I refer to the dream vision, I'm referring directly to what Enoch wrote.
I see. And this is basically his entire, the Book of Enoch is his dream vision.
No.
Oh,
the dream
okay.
vision actually only consists of those few chapters in the back between chapters 83 and 90. That's kind of the wild part about it. And I think that's why it's been missed. It's buried at the back of the book, and it seems kind of out of place when looked at the rest of the Book of Enoch. In fact, it doesn't even really seem like it should be there. But it is written in the same style. This does seem to have been written by the same hand. The wild part about it is, like I said, it's the symbolic retelling of the biblical story. And that symbolism is really kind of the key. That's kind of how I was able to figure a lot of this stuff out, was stumbling upon this story and seeing the symbolism in it. And to give a quick example, is right in the beginning, it gives basically the Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve story, except it's described with bowls, that he sees bowls coming forth from the earth, a big white one, and then a heifer, and then he sees a red one and a black one, and he goes on and explains all this, and he's always referring to these first people as bowls. And within the esoteric, that's kind of an important thing. And that's kind of the first clue, because the bowl becomes a symbol for the first men. Once that little connection is made, then you can apply it to, say, Greek mythology, when you have Zeus comes down and he seduces some woman by turning into a bowl. Well, that doesn't really make sense, but if you know that the bowl represents the first men, then what you have is a change in the story. Zeus comes down and changed into one of the first men. This also changes within the biblical story, too. I use Exodus as an example. When Moses goes up on the mountain and the Israelites have Aaron make a golden calf, Moses and God come unglued. But the Bible's really vague on why a golden calf, and why did it cause such an uproar? If you go back to the Book of Enoch, the dream vision, you realize the bowl, the calf, represents the first men. These are the first men who eventually are corrupted by Lucifer and the fall of his angels. So that golden calf becomes a representation of the first men that became corrupted by the fallen one. That's why it was such a great insult. And that's kind of the big secret of the esoteric. It's a subtle change, but it provides all kinds of little details and insights that subtly change the story.
Was it the representative of the first men, or rather the offspring, which I guess would be the same thing, the offspring of these two worlds, or these two different beings?
That eventually comes a little later with the fall.
But I mean, as the idea that it's a golden calf and instead of a bull, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really subtle, and a lot of little intricacies are lost when it's kind of put in general terms like this. Because it's kind of like trying to explain a whole bunch of biblical texts with just a few short little ideas.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little traditions and ideas that are missing and that aren't necessarily always written down. They're transmitted again through family and through tradition.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's one of the other reasons why the esoteric can hide so easily, too.
Right, because if there's no record except, within their families, I guess it's much easier to...
And then they can carry their same story around and their belief carrying the same Bible that everybody else does. Their only difference is that they have a different viewpoint and interpretation of the symbolism that everybody else just kind of ignores.
That's
which an
really
example
interesting.
going back to was the golden calf. And that's one of the little subtleties about this belief and why the dream vision is important and is the key to helping to unlock this symbolism. And this eventually leads into the symbols that we see all around us today, like the pyramid, the all-seeing eye, the winged solar disk, the Caducees.
Well, I was just getting ready to bring up the founding fathers, who, of course, used a lot of symbolism. A lot of them were Freemasons, and I suspect that these ideas were what a number of them were into. Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin. Certainly when this country was founded, they made it very clear. I mean, it was spoken and written down that this country is not founded on Christianity, on the principles of Christianity. And
I would argue that most of the ideas are Masonic. They come directly out of the lodges. The ideas of fraternity, freedom, liberty, justice, equality, those ideals come directly from Freemasonry, out of the lodges and out of the Enlightenment. Those were dangerous, subversive ideas in Europe.
Well, you can see why they would be.
Yeah.
Also, if you don't mind me throwing one more question to you from the chat room, this is great. I love it when people are so drawn to the material. Durr says, René, does RJ draw any correlation between Enoch and the Epic of Gilgamesh? And I said, I'm sure he does.
Actually, I do use that in my book. I use the parts of the Epic of Gilgamesh, especially where Gilgamesh becomes friends with Hikudio, the half-man, half-animal wild man, and show that this is a possible connection eventually into the Jacob Esau story that's contained within the book of Genesis. And that these are all talking about the same series of events, maybe in different places, in a different interpretation or culture, but it's still the same event that they're talking about.
Yeah, it's the same story over and over again.
Yeah. And the Epic of Gilgamesh, too, is a good one, too, because it also references the flood, which so many people point out.
Sure.
And it is so very similar to the biblical tradition, which is
really
the same as what's in the book of Enoch. So you can start seeing that there's a connection through all of these. And that's one of the things for the big secrets of the esoteric is these little connections. And that's in my arguments, I would say that that's probably the biggest thing in how they hide is they just leave out the connections. So you fill in the gaps. So they're not lying, they're not feeling bad, they're not really doing anything out of the ordinary. They're just kind of leaving connections out. People fill in the gaps. Their imagination gets the better of them.
And what do you want people to walk away with after reading your book? Besides a lot of great information.
Understanding that that at a certain level on this planet, especially within the ruling class, that there is a religious ideal that holds it together. And that's kind of one of the things that we as regular people have been up against, that there's a very organized religious ideal that's kept hidden from us, and it appears to give the ruling parties power. And it has everything to do with the Book of Enoch and the symbolism and how it all connects together.
So you feel that the Book of Enoch is at the heart of it all.
It's basically the key that unlocks it. It's only one aspect, but it is the dream vision, the symbolism, and the dream vision, and seeing how it's related to other cultures, other traditions, and then eventually into artifacts and the symbolisms. Kind of have to see the whole connection. Once you see the connection, it's almost impossible to deny it, because it becomes kind of overwhelming. And it will kind of rattle your cage a little, because it'll make you think in ways you're not normally taught to. That everything that you think you might know might be wrong.
What I kind of found in exploring, these kinds of ideas is that there are certain things that, that we've been taught in certain programming that we've been subject to, especially most of us in the Western world are, kind of subject to the same stories in a way. And certain buzzwords that, or I should say, explosive words that, throw up fear and that sort of thing. When we start talking about Lucifer and things like that, we've been taught to, oh my gosh, shy away from that. That's, but really there's much, much more behind these stories. And there's a reason why some of these words and references are such triggers for us, or at least it seems that way to me. And it's for a purpose. It's to keep us from digging.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the things, kind of jumping back to going into conflict that the esoterics kind of have with the church, is with that. They have a problem with that type of programming, but at the same time, they kind of use it themselves. And that certain ideas that, and this has been presented before, that things like Satan or Lucifer may not be the bad guy we were all taught he was from an ancient astronaut perspective, that he may have been beneficial to humanity. And that's kind of one of the things that the esoterics kind of lean on and point out in their belief too, is that some of this, we've been kind of not really told the truth, or that the story's a lot more complex and not so black and white.
Yeah.
That there's things like today we would call politics and little subtleties involved that it may not be so black and white.
It was funny
like
today.
We've always been taught.
Today I was listening to NPR, National Public Radio, in the car, and I just got in. I didn't even hear the full story, but someone was there, and they were Chinese, and they were talking about their grandfather, who was very, very old, and a staunch believer, I guess, in communism, or more socialism, I guess. And he said that her grandfather used to always say, religion is the tool of emperors. And I thought, how true. I may not agree with what he's into, the old man, but I certainly agree with what he said about that.
Oh, I would agree 100%. And I usually just go look at the history of the Catholic Church for the last 1,500 years. And because that's readily accessible to everybody in the Western world, and see how they ruled with an iron hand. See how they wiped out peoples and beliefs and stuff because you thought differently or you did something differently. And that's always been used as a tool. I mean, it's just a fact of human history and society.
Yeah. Absolutely. And really, no matter which side of the fence that you're on, because the people that, are proponents of organized religion, like the Roman Church or whatever, they use as a tool their teachings. But then I guess in a way, what we're talking about, these esoteric teachings are used much in the same way by these families and these other people that are sort of, in charge of the world.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody sort of co-ops stuff, for their own purposes, it seems like.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much true. The other thing that I always find interesting is at the higher echelons of the esoteric belief, a lot of these individuals believe that these so-called gods, as our ancestor called them, are still around, and that they still have some type of influence or contact or something is still going on behind the scenes away from everybody's prying eyes. And I find that interesting to go, wow, could there be a connection between this ancient information, the modern UFO phenomenon, and these secret societies? Are they all connected in this way, or are they all working together? And a lot of people have been pointing in that direction, and I think the esoterics might be onto something on that. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is yet, but it is an interesting thought, and may become a subject of another book.
Oh, wow, that would be great. That would be great. I wanted to ask you about something about, is there any information that's revealed in there or talked about that refers to, you talked about different, uses of light and things like, are there other things that speak about energy or anything like that people have been able to use to literally harness power? Was there anything like that, or is it mostly just about spiritual teachings?
It's more of looking at the dream vision. I guess you could say kind of a spiritual, but I try to take a more trying to introduce you more into the esoteric kind of viewpoint of it. And I think the easiest way to put that is that the esoterics view these things not so much as spiritual or religious; they view it more as historical. They don't view the Bible as a book of prophecy. They view the Bible as a book of history. They think all these events that are recorded there have already happened, and that's how we have these books, which that just kind of makes a lot of people just throw up their hand and go, no, I won't accept that, and walk away. And that's where I think many times for esoterics, they, oh, well, I'm not going to try to introduce everybody to this idea.
Right. Well, it's sure a huge subject, and it's really interesting. And thank you so much for all your work in wading through all the research and information to sort of digest it for us and give it to us in a way that where we don't have to do all that work. Mighty nice of you.
Well, thank you very much.
Now, once again, let's tell everyone how they can get your book, Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch by RJ Von Bruning, and that's VON, and then capital BRUENING. So look it up. I think you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can buy an ebook. You can get you can get a hard copy, right?
It's only in softback or paperback and digital copy right now.
Right. I mean, actually, I didn't mean a hardback. I meant like an actual book, which I love.
Yes.
I love my book.
An actual real book that you can hold in your hand.
I love those still. I'm telling
so
you.
do I. There's nothing better.
I love the convenience of ebooks, but I tell you, I really love the love the real books. Oh my goodness, the music's rolling. We're out of time. Thank you so much, RJ Von Bruning, for being a great guest tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. And everybody get RJ's book, Forbidden Knowledge of Enoch, and join us next week when we'll have another great show. Take care.